Ohio State and Notre Dame. Do I need to talk you into it? It's two teams ranked at the top 9, a game that delivered last year, even though it lacked offensive fireworks. But I think this is a massive, massive opportunity for Notre Dame. Massive. They have long come up short in games like this, whether it's playoff and experiences. You could hold things over their head. Like when they beat Clemson in 20, you could say, well, Trevor didn't play. And then obviously Clemson righted the wrong in the ACC championship game. Feels like Notre Dame on multiple different occasions. It's been close, but in games like this, they have failed to deliver. This is a big opportunity, according to our resident Notre Dame fan, Mark Kubiak, our producer, said it could be the biggest win for the Irish if they pull it off since 1993. I don't know. I was 4. I'll take his word for it. Let's talk about some of the good-on-good matchups in the game. You have an excellent wide receiver core for Ohio State. Not telling you anything you don't know, but what you might not know is just how good Notre Dame is in the secondary. I think it's an elite group. I had question marks coming into the season about the safety play. They have delivered in many ways with what I've seen from them through the first 4 weeks. They've played 4 games. When we think about the wide receivers at Ohio State, I think we all know about Marvin Harrison. We all know about Emeka Egbuka. They're amazing, okay? Egbuka's going to live a little more in the slot. Harrison, of course, your prototypical rangy X, your go-to guy as the wide receiver. He's number 1 prospect ever, basically. So everybody knows about Marvin Harrison. If you don't know about him, you should read about his dad. He was a pretty good player in his own right. He only has a gold jacket signifying Hall of Fame induction status in the NFL. But what makes this group really different is that their depth. Julian Fleming, he wears number 4. Cade Stover, he wears number 8. Xavier Johnson, he wears number 0. And you think about a former Notre Dame recruit, I might add, Carnell Tate, who's number 17. Also, this is just a deep group that can beat you in a lot of different ways, have a bunch of different skill sets, and feature a bunch of different players. Xavier Johnson in particular, very difficult to match up with. They'll hand it to him. They'll give it to him a bunch of different ways. He's a featured player that's explosive with the ball in his hands. And you have a tone setter like Cade Stover, the tight end, number 8. Really a tone setter. Physical dude that wants to get involved in the run game. The guy has a NIL deal with John Deere or whatever, a tractor company. Like, he hurt his back last year leading up to the bowl game because he was baling hay on Christmas. I mean, this guy is he is one of my favorite players in college football. But you think about Notre Dame's secondary. Benjamin Morrison, this is a massive game for him. Number 20, excellent perimeter defender. I think he's got future NFL potential, and this is a massive tape for him. He's going to get to draw. Likely, if he plays the boundary and they get Marvin Harrison to the boundary, he's going to get that matchup. And we know that Notre Dame plays a lot of man coverage. So this is a great opportunity for him to showcase just what he can do against the best wide receiver in America. Cam Hart on the other side, a guy that's not to be kind of forgotten. I think he's actually better than people probably give him credit. And then I referenced the safeties. I think they've come a long way in that regard. So can they match up with the secondary options? If Benjamin Morrison can somehow keep Marvin Harrison in check, that would be huge for the Irish defense. Let's talk also good versus good. Ohio State defensive line against Notre Dame offensive line. Massive, massive matchup in the game. Think about what Ohio State has. Great athleticism along the front. Not telling you anything you don't know. That one of the guys I'd keep an eye on, even go JT Tuimoloau is going to get a ton of run. His matchup against the tackles, whether it's the left tackle Joe Alt or the right tackle Blake Fisher, is one that everyone's going to want to watch. Where does number 44 go, and does he line up on the left side or the right side? I would imagine they're going to try to get him against Blake Fisher, the right tackle, and that's one that Notre Dame has to neutralize a little bit if they're going to have success in pass protection. But Mike Hall is another guy I'd keep an eye on. He's number 51. He's a handful, and he tore up Notre Dame last year. And he's going to be working against, I think, the weakness of this offensive line. Those are the guards. Pat Coogan on the left side, Rocco Spindler on the right. Those are the two guys that are going to have their hands full against a twitchy internal pass rusher in Mike Hall. So keep an eye on that matchup. I think Ohio State defensive line is excellent. Even though it doesn't necessarily get the credit that it might deserve, it's a really good group going against a really good group with what Notre Dame has along the offensive front. This is what's going to determine the outcome. Notre Dame's defensive line against Ohio State's offensive line. Now, if Notre Dame doesn't win this battle against Ohio State's offensive line, they're going to have a long day. Just going to tell you right now. Ohio State's offensive line has looked very human. You lose a couple of high-level NFL players on both tackles, lose a high-level center and Whippler. Those two guys on the edges, they're not back. Not the same. And I do think the left side of the offensive line has been pretty gettable up to this point. Ohio State's going to have to try to create some balance. They can't just put it all on Kyle McCord and say, hey, Kyle, go do your thing. All right. They're going to have to create some balance. And the way they create balance is by trying to at least stay committed enough to the run game. Travion Henderson's coming off the best day that he's had in quite a while. Chip Trayanum's the number 2, and Mayan Williams is the hammer. He's the guy that's going to be the number 3, and they'll try to get all involved, especially Mayan Williams in short yardage and goal line situations. He's a downhill guy, really not that different than Audric Estime, if you are familiar with Notre Dame's offensive personnel. Mayan Williams and Audric Estime, I think, are very similar backs. But Travion Henderson is lightning. This guy, if he gets out in space, he can take it the distance and create a lot of problems for you. And I think Chip Trayanum's kind of a good mix between the two. He has some power, he has some speed, but he's not as fast as Henderson. He's not as powerful as Mayan Williams. Really good backfield contingent. And the offensive line, if they can create some holes against Notre Dame's defensive front, that could be a little bit problematic. I also think Notre Dame has to do a better job tackling. Last week against Central Michigan, it left something to be desired. If you watch the game, you probably know what I'm talking about. It wasn't great. You're going to have to tackle a whole lot better against much more capable personnel this week. Notre Dame's defensive line, I like them a lot. I really like them. I think they're very sound. I think they're very physical. I don't think they're crazy twitchy on the edges, but I do think they're sound enough, and their linebackers with timely pressures can make Kyle McCord's life a little bit uncomfortable. I love the linebacker core at Notre Dame. I think they're as good as anybody as a group, as a contingent in the entire country. Another matchup that's going to be highly important in this game, Notre Dame's wide receivers against Ohio State's secondary. Notre Dame's wide receivers, in order of how much I love them, goes number 1, Chris Tyree. He's their most explosive weapon. He's in the slot, moved from running back to slot receiver. He's got to create some big plays. Jaden Thomas, big body, hybrid type of player that can play slot, that can play kind of loose tight end, could be a move guy, can man him up on the outside. This guy can kind of move all over the place, and I think they'll create some matchups, and his size-strength combination is a difficult cover for the most part. After that, I love Holden Stays. Holden Stays at tight end, he's got a lot of juice at a tight end spot. He can get vertical. He can be really effective off play action. He can line up at fullback and slip out in the flat and create some problems for you. So he's got a big day. And then Tobias Merriweather too. He's come on a little bit of late. He's going to be important in this game. And when you think about what Ohio State has in the secondary, Denzel Burke, number 10, he's taken some lumps from time to time. Has played decent up to this point. Davison Igbinosun is the other guy. He's number 1. These are the 2 corners. Notre Dame has to win one-on-ones against those 2. And I think the safeties, while very, very good around the box, I think they can at times become a little bit of a liability in coverage. But so far, no one has really been able to take advantage of that. The next thing that I need to know, can Ohio State stop the run? Huge, huge matchup in the game. Ohio State, so far, against Power 5 competition, albeit one game, Indiana had 71 yards rushing and a cool 2.2 yards an attempt. So far, so good for Notre Dame, but I would admit, or so far so good for Ohio State, but I would admit that's not really a good indicator of whether or not they're going to have success against the Irish. And then finally, which quarterback do you trust the most? Sam Harton, the grizzled 6th-year player that has looked phenomenal so far in the first 4 games. Very accurate, great down the field. Go watch this game against Clemson and look at how many tight window throws he had to execute to make that game competitive. Last year, man, he kept him in the game. There was good coverage from Clemson, but he was able to fit it in there. It's going to require a performance like that if Notre Dame's going to ultimately pull off the upset. And then Kyle McCord, he looked really good last week. Frankly, I don't know what to expect. I think he's a sneaky good runner, and he can definitely keep you honest. And I think he is a pretty accurate passer, but will he get flustered with a relentless pass rush that isn't necessarily all world, but they're going to keep going? They have great motor. That's something I'm really interested in watching. I'm taking Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has the recipe. Michigan's provided the blueprint for everybody. I think they'll slow the game down. I think they'll get the Ohio State offense out of rhythm. And I think Notre Dame has enough in the trenches to be able to neutralize what is a question mark along the offensive line for Ohio State. And I think they'll be able to slow down the run game enough too. I think Notre Dame has been building towards this moment. It's a huge opportunity for them. I think they'll make the most of it on Saturday in what should be one of the biggest wins in recent program history.